All of us are familiar with the world we perceive through our five senses. The physical world we can see, hear, touch, taste, and smell. But some say there is a world beyond these senses. The unseen, intangible world inhabited by gods, spirits, demons, and angels.
Human beings are symbol makers. And we are because human beings have been aware since perhaps the dawn of time that there is this real part of reality, the kind that we can touch. As I'm sitting in this chair, I can touch this, and I can touch my body, and I can see you, and all of these are things that one can perceive with their senses. But we've also been aware that there is another level of reality which is not perceivable through those senses. And so we have found ways to use those things that are in that tangible world to stand for the things that are in this other world, this intangible world.
Since the beginning of time, mankind acknowledged this spiritual kingdom, and many were able to discern it through the senses most of us no longer possess. Modern technology has consigned all things unseen to the shadowy corners of superstition, myth, and fairy tale. As we've become increasingly materialistic, we've chosen to make science our religion. And we've surrendered our spiritual beliefs at its altar. Nevertheless, not believing in something makes it no less real, and ignoring it does not make it go away. As you join us on our journey, you'll find that the spirit realm is very real, and much evidence abounds of its existence.
I simply have to believe that there is life after death, partly also because not only that life wouldn't have meaning without it, but life is a mystery anyway.
And there are still people who can perceive and communicate with this unseen universe. Lorraine Warren is one person in touch with that other universe, and she will be our guide on this particular journey. Lorraine and her husband Ed are cited by United Press International as being among the foremost authorities of ghosts and the supernatural. And the Wall Street Journal refers to the Warrens as specialists in spirits, demons, and poltergeists. Famed as ghost hunters and demonologists, Ed and Lorraine have been closely identified with several world-famous cases, including the real-life account featured in the film Amityville Horror, and have authored a dozen books on the subject of hauntings and possession. Join us for this rare opportunity to hear the real-life impressions of clairvoyant Lorraine Warren as we embark on the journey beyond.
Something has been destroyed here, I think, and it's been built on again.
This is the one area that seemed to hold the vibrations where sickness and death took place.
The ghost of a little girl. You not seen her yet?
With my these doors open, and I just saw blood dead side of someone's body.
This place is active. This is active haunting.
You can still hear the screams floating out over these little streets.
She's been seen quite often. A ghost.
It was a very warm, lazy evening, and suddenly it was biting midwinter weather he was looking at.
The area we're at is probably the most haunted location in England.
There is another level of reality which is not perceivable through those senses.
And all of a sudden the dog just went absolutely mad at the fireplace.
And if you get angry with them for switching things off, it gets worse.
It is thought that some hauntings are not personal entities at all, but are only impressions. Experts have theorized that certain materials can sometimes record traumatic events of the past. These images are then played back, much like a loop of movie film or videotape. We encounter a number of places where tragedies of another time seem to reenact themselves in just this way. Not far from the rugged North Sea coast in Norfolk, England, is Castle Rising, once home to the Earls of Essex, the Howard Dukes of Norfolk, and the Black Prince. While historians agree that the castle has a somewhat enigmatic past, we uncover a hint of the secrets which continue to reverberate within its ancient walls. The castle itself is a classic example of Norman architecture and was built shortly after the Norman conquest in 1106. It is surrounded by a formidable earthworks consisting of deep ditches and high embankments, all of which cover over 12 acres. The castle is dominated by a rectangular keep or grand tower, built by William Albini II as he and his new bride celebrated their marriage. But what historical reports cannot tell us, a clairvoyant may be able to describe in vivid detail.
The unconscious is it seems to be almost limitless. I mean, we don't know just how far things come from. We don't know how much other people's unconscious influence ours. You know, whether we can take over states of mind that really exist somewhere else. And someone that we love or close to could be thousands of miles away. Something could be happening there which comes to us as a real urgency.
We encounter no spirit entities on this visit, but as Lorraine enters what was once a chapel on the second floor of the castle, she is immediately struck by intense feelings of anguish and horrible smells of death, confronting what appears to be the recording of an age-old tragedy.
We're in Castle Rising in Norfolk, England. This building that we're in dates back to 1160-something. This is the one area that seemed to hold the vibrations of a horrible tragedy where sickness and death took place. History tells us that the monks of old would take care of the dying in an infirmary. I don't see a monk, but of course this was only a temporary infirmary. Maybe they were separated from the others because they had the plague. The floors were covered with hay, and I could see a woman ministering to them. She was dirty herself. Her clothing wasn't really like dress. It was wrapped around her. I could smell the hideous, horrible smell of rotting flesh and dying people, and certainly feel their pain. And these walls just seem to hold the vibrations. They just remain on here, probably will remain on here forever because of what had taken place.
To say the walls hold vibrations may not be far from scientific truth. Flintstone, used in the past as a building material in England, is a special variety of the mineral quartz. Historically used to amplify radio transmissions, quartz crystals also have the ability to hold frequencies in a stable way so they don't change over time. Much like the silicon used in a computer microchip, flint has the physical ability to trap and replay images with the precision of a crystal-controlled oscillator. Flint may also play a part in the supernatural phenomena people have experienced time and time again at Borley Church grounds. Anyone familiar with English ghosts has heard of Borley Church near Long Melford, Suffolk, commonly known as the most haunted place in England. Borley Church and its surrounding property date back to the 12th century, but it was Reverend Bull who built the rectory in 1863. The rectory was the center of much of the ghostly phenomena, but although it burned down in 1939, the hauntings have continued. Headless coachmen on ghostly coaches pulled by 2 bay horses race down its pathways. Shades of monks and nuns wander the grounds. Mysterious lights are seen, and dragging footsteps heard in rooms devoid of human inhabitants. Poltergeist activity and mysterious messages carved into walls were just some of the events recorded in the Reverend L.A. Foister's diary earlier in this century.
The area we're at, Borley Church grounds, is probably, and has been for a number of years, the most haunted location in England. Borley itself goes back to the 12th century. That is an ancient building. A great deal of it is made from flintstone. They're like microchips. They hold vibrations. It was Reverend Bull who was buried here that was responsible for building Borley Rectory in 1863. The original structure was destroyed by fire. When it burnt down, there was a book written, The End of Borley Rectory. It may have been the end of Borley Rectory, but certainly not the end of the hauntings that were taking place. The Borley nun, who has been witnessed and experienced by many, many people, dates back in the early 1800s. It is said that she had an affair with a monk, and she was walled up. Her remains were found, and they are buried at Liston Graveyard, where we also have psychic photographs. But on one occasion, I could see psychically this monked figure. We were in the church. There was a group of us. We had people from the very prestigious Ghost Club of Great Britain with us, as well as some of our own people. I stood by the altar, and I felt very influenced by this spirit that was right directly in front of me. Very, very strongly, I felt that. And then I began to see this monk figure. And I could see the hood, could see his hands, could even see the folds of his garb that he had on, whatever the garment was that he was wearing, the tunic. It went right down. I could see that. I could tell he wasn't a big man. But the most amazing thing was that he had this huge book in front of him. And I watched the pages moving. And as the pages moved, I said, my God, they must be parchment. Look how much substance they have. And although nobody could see it with the physical eye, not even me, because I was seeing it psychically, it was picked up on film. The Borley nun, we could actually see that. All of us, everyone that was in Borley Church that night, in the middle of the night, could see the Borley nun coming right down the middle aisle. It was very, very beautiful. There is just so much to this ancient building. I guess you might say it kind of holds the mysteries to life itself, what it's really all about. Tragedies create the ghost syndrome. This church has known more than its share of tragedies, and because of that, the hauntings still continue there today. The older the area, the more chance of tragedies in that area. But then we have spirits that remain on because of the fact that they don't really feel there's anything waiting for them on the other side. So for that reason, they stay with what they knew and are comfortable with. They don't want to go on. They just want to stay right there.
Although single entities are more common, multiple personalities can be found at many sites. For example, the Golden Fleece is a small, intimate hotel and pub situated at the end of a quaint medieval street in the walled city of York that is reported to have several manifestations. David and Sally Pine are the proprietors of this venerable edifice, which traces back to the early 1500s. On our visit there, Lorraine walks through the hotel to pick up her own impressions before talking with the proprietors.
Feel a man's presence, more like, kind of like a jokester, like someone that would do something like to kid around or joke around. Nothing very malicious about it, more human. I don't even feel that the presence of the spirit is that older person. I don't feel they died here, but I feel there's a great deal of an association here.
The first time that we're aware of it is when people have reported seeing sightings of ghosts upstairs.
And has any of your help ever experienced?
Well, my daughter has.
She has? Where?
Yeah.
What part of the building?
Upstairs where the airman was supposedly killed. It was her bedroom. And when she was about 2 years old, she used to wake up screaming every single night. saying there's a man in my room. There's a man in my room in a uniform, like a policeman.
Like
she
a
was,
police.
yeah, she was only 2, so
She was
that's
only a
what-
2-year-old child.
And this went on for about 8 months. We actually took her to the hospital to see a paediatrician, and he said that she was perfectly normal. And we moved her out of that bedroom, and from the second we moved her out of that bedroom, she never had a problem.
Now, they mentioned something also about in the kitchen, things happening in the kitchen.
Yeah, we have had plates that have flown across the kitchen with meals on them and have just dropped down and landed without smashing. And there is a definite feeling in the kitchen of somebody standing behind you.
And what about this front bar, the bar in the front of the building?
Well, this is all new to us, this front one in the front of the building. This has only cropped up last week when a paranormal expert came and said there was definitely one in the front bar, but we've never experienced anything in there.
That is the strongest vibrations in the whole
So
building.
we're told last week, so that is what we're told. But it's actually in the corner over there where the other ghost was seen.
So you're beginning to become aware of the fact that there is a chance that your place is haunted?
Oh, I think it is, without a doubt.
Among the spirits residing there is a man said to be a foreign Air Force pilot or officer who develops a special attraction to an American tourist.
April Keenan came, it was Easter last year. She came and she stayed in one of our bedrooms, which was room 4. And in the morning she came down and I said to her, have you had a good night's sleep? And she said, well, no, I haven't actually. So I said, oh dear, what was the problem? You know, was it traffic, was it noisy or something? So she said, no, something was pulling at me in the night. She said it was pulling at my feet and tugging at my hair. She said it kept me awake all night. She said my husband was fast asleep, so was my daughter. So I said, oh, you know, well, I said it could well be the spirit that we are supposed to have. We are supposed to have one upstairs. And which she was quite convinced it was, obviously, a ghost or a spirit, an entity of some sort. She was quite convinced of this. And that was the end of that. They checked out and they went. And then it was about 4 months later, I got a phone call in the early hours of the morning from April Keenan, who said to me, I don't know if you remember me. And I said, oh yes, I do. And she said, well, I know you're going to think I'm stupid, but the ghost has come back with me. And she said, it is making my life hell. She said, my life's a complete misery. Those were her words. She said she couldn't sleep, it was doing all sorts of things to her, and it was horrendous. So I contacted Cyril Smith from New Horizons Paranormal Group, and we held several channeling sessions. And he did then put this spirit Monroe through the light. When I rang April the following week, she had no idea that we'd had this channeling session, and she said it had gone, and she didn't know that we'd had this session.
But in 1995, almost exactly 1 year after April Keenan's experience, another episode occurs that bears an uncanny resemblance to the earlier encounter, when a family came to dine at the inn.
This year, on almost the same day, I think it was about 2 days out, same week, Easter week, a family came in to the pub and they dined and they had a drink. And the daughter, who was 13, moved and sat next to her mum and said to her mum, oh, I don't want to sit there anymore, I don't want to sit next to that man in the mucky old Mac anymore. And her mum said, what man in an old Mac? In an old Mac? And she said, well, the one that sat there. And of course there was nobody there.
Energy many times is usually coming from a child, and in most cases a female child about the age of puberty. And the energy from their sexual frustrations and anxieties going through that very important period of time in their life enables what is there to be attracted to them. And they're attracted by the aura, the supernatural glow that emanates from our physical body. And this aura tells exactly the type of person that we are.
So they left, the daughter and the mother left, and the father came up to the bar to speak to Craig, who was the barman. And Craig was explaining to the father about the spirit that we'd had last year, and he gave him the newspaper cuttings. And as he was reading the newspaper cuttings, he said to Craig, I can't believe what I'm reading here. And Craig said, why? And he said, well, that's my daughter's name as well, it's Keenan. And so it was exactly the same name as the woman that had seen it last year, and it was at the same time of year.
Is it possible that the ghost of the airman has returned to the tavern? Or could it be a prank played by the new jokester entity that Lorraine refers to? Or is it just a coincidence, nothing more than an arbitrary haunting in a pub riddled with otherworldly clientele?
I feel that the person who is here is a younger man. It's not an old man. I don't feel he lost his life in this building.
Well, he didn't, no. This one that was seen, we've got a name, and he was 83 years old.
Oh no, this man is much younger than 83 years old.
So it's another one. We're getting awfully full.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you may have more than one spirit. I mean, remember that where you have one spirit, you have others. So I think that there's a good chance that it isn't all associated with just the one spirit. Like what your little girl may have seen as a child, as a baby, might be one spirit, and what's going on in these other incidents could be something altogether different.
Yeah.
But they're all associated in one way or the other.
Yes, that's, it's all amazing though.
They may stay more or less held back, held down in one particular confined area of the building and may not even be aware that other spirits are there. But remember always, Jim, that like attracts like. So they tend to be attracted to somebody they'd be attracted to in life.
Not all ghosts are harbingers of tragedy. Some, for whatever reason, are no more than mischievous sprites, childish pranksters who play harmless tricks. Some years ago, when Ken Lavery purchased the George Inn, located on the main road in Shalford, England, he had heard rumors of such a spirit, the ghost of a little girl who reportedly haunted the establishment and played pranks on the owners.
Well, when we opened, there's a chap across the road. We were talking about things that go bump in the night, and he said, well, we had one. A little girl, and we've heard crying.
When I saw her, she stood where you're standing now, right where you're standing now.
That you saw it?
Oh yeah, one afternoon, like today, I think it was about this time of year, and I just ran up the stairs and went to go in the bedroom, and she was just there, standing about this high, little gingham grey sort of check pattern on, and not long hair, but shoulder length. And by the time I turned around to think, whatever was that, it was just faded away.
Before we opened the place, I'd heard several people in the village have stopped me and told me about this little girl that lives here, a bit of a prankster.
And yet, when you're in there, it just swings open and does that.
Wow.
And it doesn't matter how many times you shut it, it does.
And you can shut it and latch it.
And latch it, yeah, and make sure. And I mean, we tried it more than once at first because it worried the wife. But after a while, we just used to say to her, look, leave the door alone.
I thought, well, I can't really handle one of these, so I just asked the lady to come along. She went into the room that we was giving problems to everybody, and she found the room, and I said, well, just do your thing. And
yeah, get rid of it.
The silly part about it is that the girl used to come from here to across the road, and we coincided that when I had this clairvoyant in, his ghost disappeared as well. So I reckon
she helped the spirit to accept its death and leave.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is just through communication. Other times it requires a blessing. Sometimes I could just sit down and actually talk to the person, just like I'm talking to you, and ask them about their parents or husbands or wives or children that have passed on before them, and to think of them. Ask them about God, and if they believed in God, and if God was in their light, and to call on Him, and to go towards the light. There are many ways.
But even with the little girl gone, the inn didn't return to normalcy. As we discover when we investigate the property for ourselves, the little girl wasn't the only otherworldly inhabitant. In fact, the place had attracted other unseen visitors.
This place is active. This is active haunting. Whatever it is comes up from the downstairs, comes up these stairs, goes into here. Once you're down that way, you run out of it, and this is the center of it. This is the center of it. It's a woman, but downstairs I felt the strong presence of a man, but not even same time periods. You're all together different. You have no idea how strong this man's presence is. remained painfully strong because his death was far more painful. The woman seems to be a person who is just not at peace with herself at all, having a strong connection to the building, not so much through ownership, but through association and through time, a lot of time involved with where she is concerned. The man, on the other hand, downstairs, I get the feeling of a murder. Whatever happened to him happened to him through someone he met at this location. Definitely.
I've got a black Labrador dog, and I took him over to see the landlord the first night we bought him. And he went into, when you go in the pub door, the room, it's a restaurant. Went into there, there's a big fireplace, and the dog sat there. The dog's never been in the pub before. And the landlady was behind the bar, and all of a sudden the dog just went absolutely mad at the fireplace. Hackles came up, backed off. The landlady left the bar and wouldn't come back downstairs again.
The time period would about be late 1700s, the beginning of the 1800s. The man's time period is different. It's later than that. She goes back quite a ways. Now, she could become active from time to time. Her attraction would be to women who she's seeking some sort of solace with, and compassion, understanding, everything she didn't have in her life. But he's very bitter. He's a very bitter man, and so he would tend to stay.
For this reason, I think it's very important that we try to resolve everything in this present life. Everything that comes to us as a problem or a challenge, or we know that's meant for us in some way, whether so-called good or evil, it's in our best interest to live with it and face it and try to truly resolve it.
All of us need to live in a more balanced way. And the spiritual life needs to be attended to. If it's not, then we're not well. We're simply not well. The spiritual life holds up the rest. It holds up our spiritual, our emotional life, and our physical life.
This woman is about only in her 30s. I think this was her room. I feel that this is where she spent her time. But she's here. She's here. You feel it. You feel it very, very strong. I could walk throughout a whole house and feel fine. I could go into one room and suddenly I get this very either lightheaded or very heavy feeling that will come right over me. And I no longer feel alone. I feel that someone or something, depending on what I'm dealing with, is there with me. Now, it can manifest in many ways. I can feel the pain of the person, the anguish of the person, the psychological state of mind of the individual, if I'm dealing with an individual now. Or I can just see the whole setting as it once was, how they died. Was it tragic? Are they still there? Or is it just their impression that's there, not really them, just an impression left because of their close affiliation with that building?
One Sunday night, my son, who's 16, was screaming his head off in his bedroom. And I've obviously run in to see him, and he's under the bed covers. And I said, "What the hell's the matter?" He said, "There's a woman at the end of my bed." I said, "Oh, for Christ's sake, you've been at the beer again." And but he wouldn't come out from under the covers. And then, as I said, we had a restaurant that once a month we used to allow, once a week, the young farmers used to use it.
And they used to have visitors, like i.e. they had Alcoholics Anonymous came one week to give them a chat. We had the Salvation Army and various, but we had 3 clairvoyants came once. And after their meeting in the restaurant, they came out to the bar, and the clairvoyant ordered a couple of cups of tea and a drink. And he said, "I've just been talking to your ghost." And oh, here we go. Another one, and he said, "Yeah," he says, "she's very happy living here. It's a nice pub, and there's also music in there. She's quite happy to live here." I said, "Well, look, yeah, go and have a word with my son, will you?" I said, "He's seen it." And because I didn't really believe my son, and my son came running back, and he said he described her to a T. And she was about, what was it? 18th century, big bustle on the back of her dress, and described her, you know, everything she was wearing.
Going further north into Scotland, one encounters the imposing heights of Edinburgh Castle and the ancient Royal Mile. In the shadow of this aged roadway is walled Mary King's Close, once a major thoroughfare back in the 16th and 17th centuries. Shops and residences once lined this busy street, which was originally called Alexander King's Close after Mary's father. But a dark turn of events caused it to become known as Bloody Mary's Close, and it now lies sealed off beneath the byways and structures of modern-day Edinburgh. So come as we travel underground to learn of the extraordinary events that turned this once bustling concourse into a corridor of horrifying memories.
Oh my, look at this.
Right, now this is Mary King's Close. The close led from the High Street up there. We could walk straight up through there and come out in the High Street at that arch beside the wooden door that we came in. Up there, see that black ceiling? That's the pavement we walked along. Before, all this here was open air. And up there now, there's 2 windows, you see. There's two knobs. That's an old stone staircase that ran down the wall. Now, come in here, first of all. Right, the story is this. In 1600, that was a busy wee street. Its name was Alexander King's Close. As Alexander King was one of the owners or landlords that lived in the close. Mary King, of course, was his daughter. And they all lived together quite happily. 1600, all was well. 1645, the Black Plague hit Edinburgh, and everybody in the close here started to die off with the plague, one by one. As they died off, they were just carried from the houses here up to the top of the close where the High Street is, and dumped on a car and taken away to the plague pits.
The first signs of infection by the plague are inflammation and swelling of the lymph nodes or buboes, hence giving it the name bubonic plague. The second stage of the disease involves the respiratory system, producing pneumonia-like symptoms with a high fever and making the disease highly contagious through airborne transmission. Sometimes a rash appears accompanied by changes in blood pressure, and occasionally black pustules will form. During the final stage of the disease, the virus invades the bloodstream, causing septicemia and bringing about rapid deterioration and death.
However, everybody down here had vanished. There was even bodies left in the houses, because there was nobody left to take them away. Plague raged through the town until, at long last, itself, as they call it, disappeared. And the people came back into town and into the houses down here. But they didn't stay very long, because this close and the houses are haunted. Mary King walks up and down here to this day, and she has been seen, because we know what she looks like. It's a lady or a girl, just like you say, and it's got a long coat on and a bun in her head. Yes. There are people like you that see them. In fact, I've never seen them, but there are people that see these ghosts floating about. Mary King's been seen up here, and she's been seen down at the bottom. So everybody cleared out. Nobody would live in a haunted house or a haunted close. It was empty. They closed it up. Mary King's Close got the name of Bloody Mary's Close. Nobody would live in it. It lay empty. It lay empty for years and years. Nobody would come near it.
Hauntings frequently originate in great tragedy and pain, and little in history matches the horror of the Black Plague. Young and old, rich and poor, all were vulnerable as this dark specter cut a wide swath through the countryside. York, England was one of the many towns whose populace was decimated by the Black Death, and to this day its cobbled alleyways and crooked buildings abound with apparitions and spirits. Ghostly encounters have been well documented and accepted as credible by respected members of the community.
The public interest is what activates the spirit world. And yes, we do see more case histories, we do see more phenomena occurring, we also see a great deal more interest.
Ghost tours are popular, and we thought it would be interesting to follow one such tour as it made its way through city streets. We pause at the home of a young plague victim.
What we do know about this house is that some 400 years ago, a man lived here with his wife and their little daughter. She was about 2.5. And one night, as they were putting her to bed, they saw that she had under her arms some black boils. Well, they're not very nice. I've got them now. They're quite painful. You know, when you squeeze them, there's all that salad cream stuff comes out. But in those days, of course, there were the first signs of the Black Death, the plague, the most infectious disease from which few people ever recovered. And the authorities at the time insisted that in any house where there was somebody suffering from the Black Death, they should mark the front door with a cross to warn everybody to keep away. Well, they did this, and they looked after the little girl as best they could, but she got worse and worse, and they became more and more frightened of catching the disease, and eventually, one day, they just walked out. They walked out of the front door, they shut the door, and they never came back. They left the little girl inside the house, and of course, nobody came to her rescue because of that cross on the front door. And in fact, she died of starvation in this house. She died in the room behind that little window up there. People passing here in the night have occasionally seen a child looking out of that window, but more often they just hear the sound of crying, sobbing in the night, a child crying behind that window. The gentleman who lives in the house, he didn't believe in ghosts when he came here, but he's heard her quite often. And of course, like all ghostly happenings, when you get up to investigate, nothing. The sound stopped, there is nobody there. There we are, gather round, gather round. We're now standing in front of the treasurer's house. Very beautiful house, as you can see there. You can see through the gateway slightly sideways. Now the property of the National Trust. It was built in 1647, which makes it quite modern by York standards. It is very haunted. It is the most haunted house in York. There are said to be ghosts in every room. But there is one particularly interesting ghost story attaching to this building, probably the most famous ghost story in England. In the early 1950s, a young plumber's apprentice called Harry Martindale was working in the cellars underneath the house. He was up a ladder working on the pipework on the wall when he heard a sound like a trumpet. Just let that thing pass. Nasty modern thing, even if it is 20 years out of date. Yes, he heard this sound like a trumpet. Well, he thought it was a bit odd as he was in the cellars underneath the house, but he thought it must be a motor car horn from the streets behind the building there. As you can see, you do get cars around here occasionally. So he went on working, paying no attention. But a few moments later, he heard the same sound again, only this time much closer and much louder, and that did worry him. So he got down off his ladder and he looked around, and to his horror, he saw, coming out of the solid brick wall, a horse's head. The head came out of the wall and the whole horse followed it with a rider on its back, a man in Roman uniform. He rode out of the wall and across the cellar, and he was followed by some 16 men on foot. They were wearing helmets and a kind of short green tunic. They carried a round shield on the right arm, swords at their belts, spear in the other hand. The man just behind the leader on the horse was, of course, carrying the trumpet. They marched across the cellar, but Harry said the odd thing about it was they seemed to be sunk into the floor. They were almost wading across the cellar. He could see nothing of their legs below the knee at all. They kind of waded across, and they disappeared into the far wall. And when the last man had disappeared, Harry did not wait to see if there were any more of these men. He took to his heels and he fled, thus becoming the last Briton to run from the Roman legions in Iberacum. Well, as soon as he got out of the cellar, he told his friends and his colleagues what he had seen. They didn't believe him, of course. It was a bit far-fetched, didn't it? A whole group of Romans marching across the cellar. But Harry insisted this is what he had seen. And he went on telling people, and they went on disbelieving him, for some 10 years. And then there were workmen again in that cellar. They were digging up the floor on this occasion, and they found some 14 inches below the present floor level the remains of a Roman road. It turned out ultimately to be the Via Decumina, which came in through the eastern gate of the Roman fortress, which was directly behind the house here, not where our present medieval gate is. And the road ran through the gate straight up to the Praetorian headquarters, which was on the site of the minster there. So it became obvious that the men had been marching not on the present-day floor level, but on the old Roman road underneath. But still they didn't believe Harry, because the historian said the clothing and equipment that he had described with such accuracy did not tally with anything they knew of the legions stationed here in Iberacum at the time. So they still didn't believe him. But a few years after that, more information came to light. They were excavating a burial site to the south of the city, and it appeared that what Harry had seen were members of the 9th Legion. Now, the 9th Legion were auxiliaries. They were not regular legionary troops. They did carry a round shield, and not the rectangular shield of the Roman legions. And they didn't wear the hoopy bronze armour of Rome. They did wear this sort of short green tunic. They were, in fact, exactly as Harry had described them. But of course, the odd thing about it is that when Harry saw these men and described them in such detail, nobody knew what the 9th Legion looked like. So there was no way he could have invented that. He also said that they looked dispirited. He was insistent about this. They looked tired, dispirited, kind of run down. They were grubby, unshaven. And we don't know why this was. It remains something of a mystery. Perhaps they had been attacked out in the forest of Galtres to the east of the city there. Maybe they were wiped out. This patrol could have been totally killed. Perhaps that is why they still march up and down this road 2,000 years later, to get back into the citadel that they never made while they were alive. We shall never know the truth of it. Not the only ghost story attaching to this building, of course. In that room there, with the arch top to its windows, which is a bedroom, a murder was committed in 1862. A gentleman stabbed his wife to death. He stabbed her 27 times before calling it a day. Ungentlemanly, I thought it. It is said you can still hear the screams floating out over these little streets in the early hours of the morning. Could it be that that murder is still being committed? Or is it that the poor lady still feels the sharp prick of the knife as it goes through the outer layers of tissue into the soft squidgy bit in the middle?
Evil lurks in the spiritual world, and our next two stories deal with a clammy hand of the darker side of the paranormal.